Greetings, curious acolytes of the galaxy, and welcome back to the channel. In most of our videos, we typically dive into the various strange abilities that come from the dark side that highlight the power that the Sith carry. In many circumstances, we find that Sith vastly outclass Jedi in terms of raw power, as by the time of the Rule of Two era, a typical Sith acolyte was on the level of a Jedi Master in terms of raw strength in the Force. With the instant gratification of power that comes with making a deal with the dark side, sometimes we neglect to reveal the hidden drawbacks of using dark power. Many times, there are certain abilities that Sith sacrifice on to alter the dark side, and abilities that mere Jedi Padawans have mastered nearly to second nature. Today, my friends, we are going to talk about a particular weakness, a weakness that is told to us from the mouth of Revan himself, the man who is famous for having experienced both sides of the Force at one point in time. He was very well versed in both the light as well as the dark side, and as such, he had a very extensive amount of experience when it came to addressing the Force, and he knew exactly how to combat his Sith counterparts whenever he rejoined the light side, and vice versa. So, join us today as we take a look at what Revan said to be one of the Sith's most regrettable sacrifices, and a sacrifice in service to the dark side. Our source today comes from the Legends Revan novel. In the book, Revan is being held in captivity by the Sith for a long period of time. Over that time, he ends up garnering a kind of mutual relationship with one of the Sith Lords that frequently visited him, a man by the name of Lord Scourge. The Sith Lord had grew to be somewhat enchanted and mystified with Revan, as he recognized his raw strength in the Force and respected how much knowledge he had on the subject as well. As such, Scourge enjoyed having many conversations with Revan. During this time, however, Revan was on his way to manipulating Scourge into helping him escape by insisting that he had already foreseen his escape. This was the hook that Darth Revan was playing for, the Force ability of Foresight. This power was extremely rare amongst the Sith, and those that had it attempted to use it as much as possible. Scourge was not one of those who had this ability, and was entranced at the idea of it. Not only does Revan himself confirm that Sith had difficulties acquiring Foresight, but he also gives us an excellent explanation as to why. This is the full passage of what Revan then said in his own mind. As Revan suspected, his jailer had never experienced a vision through the Force. It wasn't unusual. The phenomenon was much more rarer in those who followed the dark side. Their focus was internal. They used the Force as a tool rather than seeing themselves as instruments of the Force's will. They were not accustomed to opening themselves up to the Force for guidance and direction. So this is all relatively straightforward, but let's go ahead and dissect it anyway. It is no secret that Sith are openly and shamelessly taught to bend the Force to their own will and their will alone. This is what grants them a much larger, more fantastical abilities that seem to deal a lot of damage and provide instant power gratification. However, because of this, a great many of them struggle with some of the more subtle concepts that the Force has to offer. A great example of this would be how many Sith of the Rule of Two never foresee their demise, but just simply expect it to happen as a part of the natural order. A better example to cite as well would be of course Starkiller. One of the biggest hurdles that Galen Merrick experienced in his walk with the Force was the fact that he couldn't grasp the nature of the light in almost any capacity whatsoever. He had been trained to use the full destructive capability of his Force strength, always turned to max potential. Vader had trained Starkiller to be nothing more than a weapon, and a weapon he was. So he struggled intensely with things like meditation, soul searching, and especially foresight. I now begin to suspect that this is perhaps why so many Sith Lords were incredibly keen on securing some form of immortality, because they couldn't see the future and couldn't know the events to come. Only very certain, powerful Dark Lords of the Sith had the innate gift of foresight as given to them at birth, some of these being Marka Ragnos and most famously Darth Sidious, but we'll get into them in just a moment. I find it most interesting that among all of the other weaknesses of the dark side, this is one that many Sith haven't exactly found a way to cope with. We covered how many Sith found ways to circumvent certain shortcomings of the dark side, such as Force healing and becoming a Force ghost. Sith managed to create certain dangerous dark side healing practices, and they also found ways to become Sith spirits through rituals and talismans, obsessed with their immortality because they lacked foresight. However, this is the one power that I haven't noticed the Sith finding any way to patch, unless they were just born with the ability innately. I also want to point out that it was the most successful Sith Lords that had the ability of foresight in the first place. We talked about how Marka Ragnos was the finest Sith King of the Golden Era. Darth Bane had the vision to begin the Rule of Two as he was gifted the knowledge that it would be successful. Darth Plagueis saw the vision of Darth Vader and knew that Qui-Gon Jinn would be the key to everything. and of course, Darth Sidious, who employed his foresight so well that he was not only able to control both sides of the galaxy during the Clone Wars, but we also find out in Return of the Jedi that he had orchestrated the whole Battle of Endor according to his grand design. A Sith Lord having the ability of foresight essentially guaranteed their success over a period of time. The Emperor is a great example of just how destructive a Sith can be when they do have this gift of foresight. It was through visions that he learned that Luke was Vader's son. Even though he couldn't ever find Yoda in the Force, he still knew that he had died when he did die in Return of the Jedi. He knew that the Rebel squadron had penetrated the Endor fleet and were on the surface of the forest moon, and had designed the trap to lure the Alliance fleet in. Sidious even foresaw his own death, but through his hubris, he attempted to manipulate events in his own favor. Despite all of that, hubris was the key to everything. Just like in the eyes of the Jedi, the Sith's eyes are also blinded by their arrogance. For most Sith, they are denied this basic ability that is given to even Jedi Padawans because of their focus and it being so inward. But for Darth Sidious, no matter how skilled he was in this innate power, in the end, his own massive ego got in the ways of his final plans, as he completely underestimated Luke's influence over his own apprentice, Vader. The dark side is a pathway to many abilities that some consider to be unnatural. However, as we've now seen, that can sometimes come at the cost of some other abilities that are entirely natural, as well as all too necessary. But anyway, my friends, and fellow students in the Force, what do you think about this phenomenon? Revan's assessment of the Sith, as always, was very spot on. But we would love to get your opinion on how necessary you think the ability of foresight is to be a Force sensitive. And as for you, would it be a must to have this Force ability if you were a Jedi or a Sith? Let us know in the comments down below, and we'll hopefully see you in the next video. I have foreseen it.